Morning, everyone. Morning. There was a little vote in Parliament last night. At the moment, I don't even know what to start with. But I'm going to start with what has been the funniest thing that has emerged this morning, because it is absolutely priceless. So what happened yesterday is, for those who don't know, and everyone here knows, let's be honest, the Parliament were debating the Privileges Committee report. Hours of debates. I unfortunately missed it. I already had pre-arranged plans. Rishi Sunak missed it. He did not have pre-arranged plans, no matter what he says. Yesterday, or the weekend, he was down in the parliamentary business as leading a debate in the House of Commons, right? That disappeared. He had time. He had time. Yes, he was with the Swedish PM, wasn't he? The Swedish PM didn't want to spend all evening with Rishi Sunak. He had time. And he's looked a bit silly because quite a surprising number of cabinet ministers voted in favour of the report. So although when you looked at the debate, Penny Mordaunt was sat on the government bench on her own, no one, and this was appalling, really. No other cabinet minister was there to offer her some moral support, which, you know, I mean, that's poor, isn't it? Isn't that poor? Even if you were going to abstain or something like that, or you know, you would just not let her sit on her own. What does that say about the camaraderie within the very top of the Conservative Party? But anyway, she was there on her own, even though a load of cabinet ministers still voted in favour of the report. Rishi Sunak didn't vote at all. Didn't vote at all. But because a load of Tory MPs have been undermining the committee, and we're not just talking, oh, I think, like, it would be completely fine if some of them thought, look, okay, I think you might be going a bit much on the 90-day suspension, or, you know, whatever. You can have that as a view. You're not undermining the committee. You're not undermining Parliament. But several of them have, and they've called it a kangaroo court. Now, one MP, the MP for the Isle of Wight, Bob Seeley, was being interviewed this morning. I'm absolutely going to use this in my noonday video. And Victoria Derbyshire, I think it was, that interviewing him, said, you called it a kangaroo court. He went, no, I didn't. No, I didn't. And now, Bob Seeley, just for context here, voted in favour of the reports. So he was calling it a kangaroo, and he was, because there's a clip of him calling it a kangaroo court. But he's voted in favour of it. And now he's denying he called it a kangaroo court, even though it's on film. There's a record of it. And you ask yourself, well, why is that? It's because there is to be follow-up action against MPs. We don't know what action it will be, but there is to be follow-up action against MPs who undermined the committee. Like, and when we say undermine the committee, let's be clear what we're talking about here. Have actually accused the committee of being prejudiced against Boris Johnson and abusing parliamentary procedures. Now, they've done neither. They've done everything by the book. They've done everything in the way MPs unanimously asked them to do it. Jacob Rees-Mogg, yesterday in the debate, tried to say to Harriet Harman, because some tweets came out where she'd been critical of Boris Johnson. I mean, for goodness sake, who hasn't been critical of Boris Johnson? So Jacob Rees-Mogg was going, oh, it's not, I'm not accusing you of being biased, you understand. But it's not just about being biased. It's about the perception of bias, you see. And there might have been the perception of bias, so you should have accused yourself. And Harriet Harman stood up and says, you're quite right. We should avoid any perception of bias. Absolutely. At the time when these tweets emerged or came to light, she said, I approached the government and I said to them, do you have a problem with this? Because I'm quite happy to stand aside. And the government said to her, no, we have full confidence in you. So that shut his. Actually, it did shut him up. He had a stupid, childish smirk on his face though when she said it. But anyway, a couple of things there. Blair, so saying there, Seeley doesn't know up from down, from what I can tell after his unhinged rant at the debate yesterday. Yeah, but I tell you what though, he is absolutely bricking it. That is because you ask yourself, one of these MPs is coming out, oh, it's a kangaroo court. It's a kangaroo court. Absolutely disgraceful, handing out our glorious leader, and then he votes in favour of it. Not abstains. Most of them abstain. He votes in favour of it, and now he's denying he called it a kangaroo court when it's on record. And why is that? Because he is bricking it. Like some of the nutters, like Jacob Rees-Mogg and Andrea Jenkins, they probably don't care, because if any action is taken against them, I mean, they're not going to get kicked out of Parliament. I don't know what the action will be, but if there is any act, it's probably just like a few day suspension or something, you know. It'll not be anything to trigger a recall petition. It'll just be a few days suspension, just to a slap on the wrist. So they don't care about that. The proper nutters don't care about that. Seeley obviously does. You know how it is sometimes. Like, I've been a teacher, I've seen this all the time. And you've got a group of kids, and they're like naughty kids. And there's like the ringleaders, and the ringleaders are usually proper ed cases. And they don't really care about the consequences because their parents are also ed cases, right? There is no consequence that really bothers them. But then there's the hangers on, you know, the ones who go around with them, the sheep. And their parents were, you know, if you just suggest to them that you're going to get their parents involved, they will absolutely crap themselves. And he's like that, isn't he? He's the one who was going around with the nutters. I'm one of the nutters. And now someone's gone to him and says, I'm going to ring your parents up. And he's going, oh, no, don't do that. Don't do that. No, I didn't mean to. Sorry. Oh, it's glorious. But the absolutely tearing themselves to pieces. The things is, Jenkins is my MP's second wife. Yeah, I think she's going to get through quite a few fellas in her time. She's like, she is proper off the wall, isn't she? She's absolutely insane. But yeah, so other things as well that came up. So other things that came. One of them was, I can't remember who it was now, but there was an MP who was trying to say, for example, that it should be for Conservative MPs to take action against Conservative MPs, which is, first of all, quite interesting, because it's I thought Brexit was supposed to be about returning sovereignty to Parliament. So he's talking about taking sovereignty away from Parliament, right? Anything. And that's the thing about some of these people. Some of these people that are saying Parliament shouldn't be doing this are the very Brexiteers who were talking about restoring sovereignty to Parliament, right? It's like, well, you're now saying that they should have less sovereignty than you perceived them to have whilst we're members of the EU. But as for this person saying it should be for Conservative MPs to decide what happens to Conservative MPs, well, let's go through that, shall we? So it was, if we look at the committee, if we take out the Labour and the SNP MPs from the committee, it was a 4-0 vote in favour of a 90-day suspension, because there were 4 Tory MPs on that committee. Every single one of them said there should be a 90-day suspension. So that is Conservative MPs deciding what happens to a Conservative MP. And then in the vote yesterday, now, of course, they weren't voting for a 90-day suspension, because they've instead taken away Boris Johnson's pass, Westminster pass. That was the vote. But it was, if they voted to accept the report, they've also voted to accept that a 90-day suspension was acceptable. And they voted 118 to 6. So Conservative, just taking away all the other MPs, Conservative MPs voted 118 to 6 to support the report. So that is also Conservative MPs. Now, I know, because Graham was saying as well, and there's a lot of people saying, wasn't it 7 who voted against? It may have been, but in terms of the number of names recorded, it's 6. Apparently, there was a problem with Desmond Swain. So Desmond Swain, the dandy, you know, he apparently couldn't get his card to work. So, but as far as I'm concerned, if his name's not shown up, if he somehow managed to mess up swiping a card, I mean, I can't be held responsible for that. And if he wants to complain to me, then he can do. But until then, as far as I'm concerned, it was 118 to 6. But 118 to 7 is still a lot of Tory MPs against not many Tory MPs saying that the 90-day suspension should have stood. So they've got no arguments at all. Absolutely none. Are we going to talk about the one-man Johnson fan club that is Doncaster's MP? So do you mean Nick Fletcher? So he's the MP for Don Valley. So Doncaster has 3 constituencies. It used to be very solidly Labour all the time I was growing up. One of them flipped Conservative in the last election, Don Valley, which is Nick Fletcher. Interestingly, that constituency will no longer exist at the next election. It will become part of what is going to be called Doncaster East, which is the seat I just so happen to be standing for. I won't actually become their candidate. Very small chance of it. But on the off chance I did become Labour's candidate, I shall be up against Nick Fletcher. I shall enjoy that. That's going to be hilarious. I shall enjoy the hustings. But Nick Fletcher is one of the 6 who did vote against it. It has to be said, most of Johnson's well-known headbangers didn't. Jacob Rees-Mogg was at the debate, moaning, getting his head kicked in by Harriet Harman. He didn't vote. He abstained. Andrea Jenkins didn't vote. Brendan Clark-Smith was off at a party with Boris Johnson. In fact, he was boasting about the fact yesterday, when it's a sitting day for parliamentarians, right? It's a sitting day in Parliament. And this MP who's taken our money has said he's got better things to do than work as an MP. He's watching the cricket, he said. According to him, he was watching the cricket and going to a party with Boris Johnson in the evening instead of doing his job as an MP. So he wasn't even there. Nadine Dorries disappointed me. I wanted her to turn up pissed as a fart and just... what I wanted to say was her, because it would have been quite late on and she would have absolutely been as drunk as a skunk. Stand up, stagger up and say, "This is outrage. You will be very rude to my Boris," and then collapse back onto the seat drunk. That would have been hilarious. Unfortunately, we were denied it. I don't even know she was there. But she abstained as well. She couldn't be asked. So the proper Johnson supporters couldn't be asked. If I look at the list of the ones who voted no, there was Sir William Cash, Bill Cash. He's a diehard Brexiteer. Nick Fletcher, of course. You've got Adam Holloway. I mean, you know, yes. All of these are Boris Johnson supporters, but like most of them aren't particularly well known. You've got Cash and Fletcher. That's basically it. Joy Morrissey, she sort of came to a little bit of prominence last year, didn't she? But she's not one of the really famous ones. Where were all the famous ones? Where were the ones who'd been getting knighthoods? Where was Priti Patel? Where was Jacob Rees-Mogg? Where was Michael Fabricant? You know, all these people, all these ones who were attacking the Privileges Committee and say this is outrage, you should defend Boris. Why weren't they defending Boris then? Why were they not? Phil, I hope you'll make it and then go for the front bench. No, I certainly will. Honestly, I will not go for the front bench at all. I've got stuff to do if I end up in Parliament. I've got stuff to do related to Brexit and proportional representation. If you become an MP, would we still have daily YouTube videos? We would have YouTube videos as and when I could do them. I see no reason not to be able to do them several a week. I don't know how many, obviously, being an MP, particularly a new MP, when you need to get yourself up to speed with everything, I imagine is time consuming. Because I shall not be disappearing off to watch the cricket or go to a party with Boris Johnson instead of attending Parliament. If you get elected as an MP, could you actually bring yourself to talk to a Tory in Parliament with anything but poorly concealed contempt? Depends who they are. But to be honest, I'm quite easygoing. I'm not someone who I don't like when people talk about hate. I actually genuinely don't hate anyone. I will talk to anyone, but I will also be passive aggressive as hell. I can be incredibly. I tend to use humor rather than bile, but I tend not to leave it. This is another reason why I'd be no good as a minister. I may not be any good as an MP. I'm really not very diplomatic, you know. But there we go. Should MPs be paid for what they actually do in Westminster? I'm so tired of MPs getting a large salary to not do their job. The issue is MPs have multiple jobs. It's not just about Parliament. It's also in their constituency. For example, and we mustn't judge, there will be a lot of Conservative MPs who abstained yesterday who were genuinely tied up with other things. Now, if we bear in mind, take Tobias Ellwood, for example. Now, he did turn up. He did vote in favour of the report, but he wasn't actually going to be in Parliament at all because he had business with he's the chair, in fact, of the Defence Select Committee. So I think he's the chair, but he is. So he was going to be away like Portsmouth or something as part, you know, so people may have seen him on LBC at the weekend and live on air. He was explaining this, that he's been explicit. He would vote for the report. He supports the report. but he's going to be away on select committee business. And on air, the host was reading out messages, some of which claimed to be his constituents. And he said, okay, look, you know, I see what people are saying. I will cancel that and turn up. But a lot of MPs will have had prearranged events in their diary, because this debate was thrown quite quickly. We only got the report last week, and then we have this debate on Monday, which is fine. But you might have made plans in your constituency, because you're not in Parliament every day when Parliament's sitting. You have stuff to do. So I don't think it is right to have someone deciding what they should get paid depending on where they are. I just think their voters should consider whether they really want an MP who, instead of doing their job either in their constituency or in Parliament, they instead decide to sack days, working days off to watch the cricket and go to a drinks party with a former leader. I thought I wasn't so keen on being in London. No, I'm not at all keen. It will come at a cost. This is an absolute. It will be a sacrifice for me. I don't want people to get out their tiny violins, but it will be a sacrifice for me. It means a lot of travelling when I'm a shut-in. It means even just going around my constituency, which is most unlike me. It means going to London quite a lot, and it's not just the length of the journey. It's also the fact that I'll be in London, all big cities. I'm not a very like lots of crowded people type person, and it will mean having to sort out some accommodation. So I'll probably end up sharing with an MP. Hopefully, I won't end up sharing with a complete cretin, but who knows? Who knows? Lawrence Melia, thank you very much for the $4.99 super chat. The Tories use sovereignty as if we didn't have control over our own country. It's just a word they use to get what they want, their form of control. Exactly. It's utterly hypocritical. They didn't mean, when they said take back control, they didn't mean for us. They meant for them. They meant for them because EU rules stop them. For example, do you know what? In the EU, you're not allowed to just randomly pump out a load of effluents into your waterways. You're not supposed to have beaches where you go up to it and there's a sign saying, sorry, you can't come into the water because the poo you had this morning is bobbing around wanting to have a word with you. You know, in fact, we used to get fined for much weaker breaches than this by the European courts. So that's what they wanted. They wanted the power to deregulate, to get rid of all of the workers' rights, consumer rights, environmental protections, safety rules. They wanted to, that's what Brexit was for them. They wanted to do away with all of these. And that's why they're still raging that Brexit's not been done, because they're not that bothered about the customs union or the EU, or some of them are, or the single market. What they wanted was to deregulate. And they haven't got that because Kemi Badenoch isn't playing ball now. So it's like no one's got what they want from Brexit. The whole thing hasn't actually pleased anyone, apart from some investment bankers who made a fortune when the pound crashed. Admiral Pegasus is saying, glad to see my Cleethorpes MP, Martin Vickers, voted in favour. Yeah, he used to be my MP as well. That was when I was living in Immingham, because it's also Immingham's MP, isn't he? I had to go to him one time on behalf of someone else. Utterly useless. Really, really useless. But yeah, he at least voted in favour. So did Holly Mumby-Croft, who's the Scunthorpe MP. So I was living in Scunthorpe at the last election when it went Tory. Phil might go native and enjoy being in the South. No, I shall be hot-footing it back whenever I don't need to be in Parliament, I'll tell you that. I shall cause trouble as well in the tea rooms, because I will go to the tea rooms and so on, because you need to do that to talk to other MPs. But I will not eat or drink anything from there, because I'm not having taxpayers subsidise my food and drink, especially during a cost of living crisis. Fabricants' hair will be remembered long after the man is forgotten. Oh, dear. Sinn Féin MPs only get salary payments for when they attend the sittings. What's good for the goose? Yeah, but they refuse to take the oath or anything like, or to like take their officers. Whereas these people have like an MP is effectively, the voters vote for them to act in their interests, and they've got an awful lot of leeway about what that is. You know, there are some MPs who don't turn up at all, but they might be in their constituency a lot. There are some MPs who turn up all the time, but they may not be in their constituency a lot. So it's not really up to someone else, an official, to decide what the balance should be. It's just that some MPs are not in their constituency or Parliament. Come on, Phil, you're halfway to being a Tory when it comes to your attitude towards Scottish democracy and our right to decide our independence. Why? My position is that Scottish Parliament should decide when independence referenda are held. That is my position. Obviously, there needs to be timelines. You can't have one every Tuesday. Can become an advocate for English regional devolution, Yorkshire Parliament now. Well, no, we should have a Parliament. We should have the Parliament in Yorkshire. The House of Commons, the Houses of Parliament is falling down. It's archaic. It's a right mess. It's like the dandy couldn't even vote properly. We don't even have a modern voting system. The voting system in the House of Commons is that you all sat on these benches. You all have to walk down them, try not to kill yourself. Go to the division lobby, walk through a door, scan yourself in, and then go back to the chamber. Oh, it's ridiculous. Look at modern parliaments. They've got voting machines. You just sit on your thing. Right, that's how I'm voting. No messing about. No Desmond Swain going, sorry, I broke my card again. I couldn't seem to vote. No, it all worked fine. But they can't do that in the House of Parliament. The building's too old. It's knackered. It keeps costing a fortune. So just let it fall down and build a parliament in Doncaster. And then you can separate the financial and the political centres in this country as well. Stop London hogging everything. But anyway, once met Michael Fabricant, I threw chewing gum in his head. Don't be mean. Don't be mean to poor Michael. Michael is unfortunately one of those. He's really a victim. Like Boris Johnson called him an idiot several years ago. Said Michael, I can't remember his exact words, but he called him stupid. And he also called his voters stupid. He said, goodness knows how stupid his voters must be. But there we go. Right, let's have a look here. What else happened? There's so much happened. I'll tell you what's worth thinking about is what is the implication. So I'll actually broach this subject now because a lot of people found it funny. I'm going to stand up for the speaker on this one because he wasn't impressed and I wasn't impressed either. So we know what the plan was. The plan, Boris Johnson had told his supporters not to trigger a vote. So what happens at the end of the debate, the motion is presented to Commons. And the speaker stands up and says, all those in favour say aye. You go, aye. All those against say no. And what was supposed to happen is no one would say no, so there wouldn't need to be a vote, right? But then the Labour chief whip stood by the speaker, was shouting, no, no, no. I have to say and it forced the vote. I don't think he should have done. I know people find it funny and Labour will get strategic advantage. To me, it's dishonest because he does support the report and he now has gone down as not supporting the report because he can't change his votes. Now, if you look at the list, it doesn't look like he's one of the 6 who voted no, but he was one of the tellers. So he's on the no side. I think that's dishonest. Now, you can also argue that it was because 6 MPs voted against it, and yet they didn't call out no. So that is dishonest on their part as well. But 2 wrongs don't make a right. But but it happened. It has happened. It's been done. I don't approve of it. But the vote has happened. What's be interesting is how it now impacts Tory MPs. Because the reason Labour triggered the vote it's not because they wanted to string things out for another 15 minutes. It's because they wanted Tory MPs to nail their colours to the mast. Because there will be voters, there'll be some voters who are diehard Boris Johnson fans, and they will not be impressed with Tory MPs who vote in favour of the report. There will be some voters, Conservative voters, who are appalled at what Boris Johnson has done, and they are appalled at people trying to attack the integrity of Parliament. And so they will not be impressed with people who voted no, or maybe even those who abstained. So Labour have done this to cause trouble. Now, what I will find interesting is, so imagine one of the MPs who voted in favour of the report. They will lose some votes to the Boris Johnson ultras. They will gain some votes from maybe some swing voters who, or gain or retain, shall we say, some votes from swing voters who demanded that their MP support the report. And if they hadn't done, they would have lost their votes. What I don't know is what the balance is. So the Tory MPs voting yes, will they gain more votes or retain more votes than they lose? Because I don't think Tory MPs are really going to gain votes at the next election. But in terms of retaining them, are they going to retain more votes than they lose as a result of voting yes? At which point, what about those who abstained but without a good reason? Also, what about those who abstained with a good reason? Because they will be tainted. Because I absolutely guarantee, and I would have no shame in doing this, if I were a Labour candidate up against someone who abstained, I won't be, because if I am a Labour candidate, it will be up against someone who voted no. But if I was against someone who abstained, I wouldn't bother to check whether or not they had a good reason for abstaining. I would simply tell voters that they refused to support the Privileges Committee report into Boris Johnson's lies. And I would have no shame in doing that at all. I wouldn't even look it up. And if they tried to say, oh, no, we had all this thing, I would pour scorn on it and say, you had something more important to do than to defend our Parliament. You had something more important to do than to defend our Constitution against those who would seek to undermine it. I would really lay it on thick. And so too will every Lib Dem, Labour and other candidate up against any Tory candidate who abstained on that vote, whether they had a good reason to do so or not. Welcome to the Revolution saying, Labour forcing a vote to me is an acceptable level of dishonesty. It's good politics to put Tories in an uncomfortable position. The Tories wouldn't think twice about it. I absolutely agree that the Tories, particularly the Tories we're talking about, would have no qualms about doing so themselves. We know that they, in fact, we can link this. We know that they do subvert the normal parliamentary procedures. We've seen it in the last week. They do it. In fact, it's not just that they would do it. They have done worse than this multiple times. So yes, you are absolutely right. But and it's not something I'm gonna sulk about. I will just say, if it were to me, like, if I were the Labour leader, let's say, and I'm the person obviously directing the chief whip, I would not ask them to do that. That's what I would say. I would just say, if someone isn't prepared to say no, then I would not do it myself. But it's not like something I'm going to rant and rave about. And it is strategic. And I've supported Labour doing things that I wouldn't necessarily approve of for strategic purposes before. So, you know, I have to be consistent, I suppose. The punishment should have been modified to strip his honours list. Yeah, that'd have been interesting, wouldn't it? Labour, I suppose, in theory, could have done that, could they? I'm not sure if they could or they couldn't, because technically the honours list has already gone through now. The King has already approved it. So, although the Prime Minister, maybe they could retract it, because they haven't been awarded yet. The King has just authorised them. That might have been interesting. Yeah, amend the motion. Yes, that could have been interesting. But there must have been some good reason why they didn't. Or maybe it's because Labour don't mind these honours going through, because they are going to be damaging to the Conservatives. Because it's not just Boris Johnson. Rishi Sunak has allowed these honours to go through. Remember, look at almost all of these honours are for people who covered up for Partygate. Two of them have been caught in a video, or one of them was in the video, but the other one was at the party, who have been honoured. One of them, like Sean Bailey's going to the House of Lords. He was one of the people in that illegal lockdown party for which there were invites with his name on it. What was it? Jingle and Mingle, that Christmas party for Sean Bailey. It was Sean Bailey's party. What was at the time Tory mayoral candidate for London. He's going into the House of Lords. So it could well be that although Labour will say these honours shouldn't go through, and they'll believe it, they shouldn't go through, it could well be that they didn't want to force a block, because it's also, again, strategic for them, for the Tories to be seen for the sleaze monkeys that they are. So I'll go through the last few comments here. Chatty Rat's mentioning King of Scotland here. I obviously missed something, but I will just point out, I always like to point this out, King Charles is the King of Scotland. And I don't mean because he's the King of England, it's sort of merged. I mean, he's genuinely, there is no King of England, because the last monarch, reigning English monarch, was Elizabeth I. She died childless, at which point her nephew, who was the King of Scotland, a separate King of Scotland, took over the throne of England. So everyone since has been from that line. King Charles is a direct descendant of Robert the Bruce. So he is actually more the King of Scotland than the King of England. He is both, because they merged the thrones into one. But it was the Scottish throne took over the English throne, not the other way around. So really, if we do split up, you should have Charles back. Now, I don't mind Charles, I have to say. You know, for his environmental work, I forgive his gaffes. But, you know, nonetheless, he is the Scottish king. Anyway, let's go to some more relevant ones if we can find them. I can never resist those ones, sorry. With Phil on this one, it's strategically useful for Labour during the election campaign to point out the honours list. Yes. There we go. The one going to the Lords will have to make a maiden speech, especially at the 28-year-old or 29-year-old. Yeah, so now it turns out because she's embellished what she was doing on her LinkedIn. A load of people say, no, she weren't doing that. She was there for maternity cover. That one who's getting a peerage, she was there for maternity cover. She's got something on. She's caught Boris Johnson out on something, hasn't she? This will be blackmail. People are talking about, oh, she's his daughter. She won't be his daughter. And he may or may not have had an affair with her. Who knows? I mean, she's blonde and she's got legs. But it's just more likely she's got something on him. Because maternity cover, you know, when I've had maternity cover in my department, you give them a bottle of wine and a box of chocolates. You don't give them a peerage. Absolutely insane. But there we go. Privatize the royal family. Well, it sort of already is. But anyway, there we go. We seem to have run out of questions on that one. We're just now talking about the monarchy. That's my fault. I'm sorry. But thank you very much for coming on anyway. I will be putting some further thoughts together into some less ramshackle order for my noonday video on my own channel at Different Buyers. Don't forget to click the like button here and to subscribe, and to check out the description below for details of Patreon. Have a good day, everyone. Try not to bake too much. Don't go out and get yourself sunburnt. And until next time, I'll see you later.